This is the Quiet Lexicon, a collection of meditations on the still places between thought and memory. Tonight's reading is Fernando Pessoa on Solitude, adapted from public domain writings and translations. It is not meant to be studied or explained. It is meant to be felt, like light through closed eyelids, or the sound of water when you are too tired to speak. Breathe. Let the words find you where you are.
There is a certain kind of silence that lives in rooms where someone has thought too long. It is not emptiness exactly, but the residue of presence, the thin echo of sentences that were never spoken aloud, the faint warmth left behind by a body that has sat too many hours beside the same lamp. Pessoa once wrote that he was the outskirts of some non-existent town, and in this room, one can almost hear that town breathing in the distance, a ghost city built of memory and half-abandoned dreams. The desk is small, the lamp tired, the air thick with the smell of paper and old tobacco. Outside, the city exhales its mechanical sighs, trams rattling down wet streets, footsteps blurring into one another, a cat crossing somewhere unseen. Inside, only the clock keeps time. It does not mark hours, but the slow dripping of consciousness.
Sometimes he lifts his head and watches the dust float through the lamp's small circle of light. In that drifting movement, he finds the purest image of his own existence, always suspended, always between falling and flight. Solitude, he thinks, is not something chosen. It happens the way night happens, inevitable and soft. You do not enter it, you awaken inside it. He wrote once, "I've always rejected being understood. To be understood is to prostitute oneself. I prefer to be taken seriously for what I'm not, remaining humanly unknown with naturalness and all due respect. The walls here know him better than any friend could. They have absorbed his sighs. They have held his silences like precious cargo. They do not judge the hours he spends staring at nothing, tracing patterns in the smoke that rises from his cigarette."
Nothing would bother him more than if they found him strange at the office. He likes to revel in the irony that they don't find him at all strange. He likes the hair shirt of being regarded by them as their equal. He likes the crucifixion of being considered no different. There are martyrdoms more subtle than those recorded for the saints and hermits. There are torments of our mental awareness, as there are of the body and of desire. He has lived in this room for years, or perhaps it has only been months that feel like years. Time moves differently when you are alone. It stretches, it pools in corners, it becomes something you can almost touch. There are evenings when he feels the room breathing with him, expanding as he inhales, contracting as he exhales, as if they have become a single organism, man and space, thought and shelter.
Nothing would bother him more than if they found him strange at the office. He likes to revel in the irony that they don't find him at all strange. He likes the hair shirt of being regarded by them as their equal. He likes the crucifixion of being considered no different. There are martyrdoms more subtle than those recorded for the saints and hermits. There are torments of our mental awareness as there are of the body and of desire. He has lived in this room for years, or perhaps it has only been months that feel like years. Time moves differently when you are alone. It stretches, it pools in corners, it becomes something you can almost touch. There are evenings when he feels the room breathing with him, expanding as he inhales, contracting as he exhales, as if they have become a single organism, man and space, thought and shelter. He once wrote, "To think is to destroy." Thought corrodes reality until nothing is left but thought itself. Perhaps that is why he stays here, watching the shadow of his own hand move across the desk. The longer he remains alone, the more real the thought becomes, and the less real the world feels. And yet there is a tenderness in this disappearance, a quiet permission to exist without having to perform existence. He does not need to be understood. He needs only to continue breathing in rhythm with the clock. Every solitude is a slow conversation with the self. At first, it sounds like loneliness, then like confession, and finally like the sea, steady, endless, impersonal. He writes to no one, knowing that no one is the most honest reader there is. The pen scratches across paper. The sound is the only company he needs tonight. Each word is a small rebellion against silence. Each sentence a thread cast into the dark, hoping to catch on something solid, knowing it probably won't. But he writes anyway, because writing is what you do when you cannot sleep and cannot wake, when you exist in that threshold space where the self becomes translucent. The lamp flickers. He adjusts the wick. The light steadies. Outside, the rain begins. Silence emerges from the sound of the rain and spreads in a crescendo of gray monotony over the narrow street he contemplates. He's sleeping while awake, standing by the window, leaning against it as against everything. He searches in himself for the sensations he feels before these falling threads of darkly luminous water that stand out from the grimy building facades, and especially from the open windows. And he doesn't know what he feels, or what he wants to feel. He doesn't know what he thinks, or what he is. All the pent-up bitterness of his life removes before his sensationless eyes the suit of natural happiness it wears in the random events that fill up each day. He realizes that while often happy and often cheerful, he's always sad. And the part of him that realizes this is behind him, as if bent over his leaning self at the window, as if looking over his shoulder, or even over his head, to contemplate with eyes more intimate than his own the slow and now wavy rain which filigrees the gray and inclement air. He listens to it the way some people listen to music, attentively, gratefully, as if the rain were speaking a language he is only beginning to understand. And perhaps it is. Perhaps the rain knows what he knows, that solitude is not the absence of the world, but its truest presence. When all the noise falls away, what remains is this, the
The simple fact of being here, breathing, thinking, watching the lamp cast shadows that have no hurry, no destination, no need to be anything other than what they are. He closes his eyes for a moment. The darkness behind his eyelids is warm, familiar. It feels like coming home to a place he never knew he'd left. When he opens them again, the room is exactly as it was. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. This is the paradox of solitude. It makes the world smaller and infinitely larger at the same time. In every quiet room, there is a mirror that waits like an unanswered question. Pessoa sits before his, an oval piece of glass clouded by years of candle smoke, and studies the face that has become a stranger to him. He wrote once that man shouldn't be able to see his own face. There's nothing more sinister. Nature gave him the gift of not being able to see it, of not being able to stare into his own eyes. Only in the water of rivers and ponds could he look at his face, and the very posture he had to assume was symbolic. He had to bend over, stoop down, to commit the ignominy of beholding himself. The inventor of the mirror poisoned the human heart.
How strange, he thinks, that we must inhabit our own features for a lifetime and still never learn their language. He leans closer. The mirror holds not a person but a mood, the soft gray light of someone who has outlived his own illusions. He recalls writing, "I am my own landscape." And indeed, what he sees now is not a man, but terrain. Plains of fatigue, rivers of old desire, a sky perpetually overcast by thought. The longer he looks, the more he feels the mirror looking back, patient and merciless. There are lines around his eyes he doesn't remember earning, a tightness in his jaw that suggests he has been clenching it for years. His hair, once dark and full of promise, now carries threads of gray like early frost. Who is this person, he wonders? When did he arrive?
It occurs to him that solitude is the truest form of honesty, because there is no audience to deceive. When no one is watching, we stop performing even for ourselves. He speaks softly to the reflection, as one might to an animal one hopes not to startle. What are we, he asks, but a collection of attempts at being real? The mirror does not answer. It offers only light and the faint pulse of the candle's flame. And yet within that silence he hears the faintest affirmation, the agreement of two shadows that know they are the same. He thinks of the line, "I feel as if I am always on the verge of waking from a dream I do not remember having." Perhaps that is what solitude is, the long verge, the endless pre-dawn between worlds. He touches his face. The skin is cool beneath his fingertips. Real, he thinks. I am real. But even as he thinks it, he feels the doubt creep in. That familiar questioning of whether reality itself is just another story we tell to avoid the terror of unknowing. The mirror shows him many faces if he looks long enough. The child he was, the old man he will become, The versions of himself that existed in other people's eyes, now faded, like photographs left too long in the sun. Which one is true? Perhaps all of them, perhaps none. He remembers a morning years ago when he woke and did not recognize his own hand on the pillow. For a full minute he stared at it, the fingers, the knuckles, the small scar near the thumb, and felt nothing but confusion. Whose hand is this, he had wondered. And then, more frightening, who is asking?
The moment passed. Recognition returned like blood flow after numbness, but the question remained. Outside, the rain begins again, soft as breathing. He turns from the mirror and sits once more at his desk. He does not wipe the glass. He lets the face fade. It seems kinder that way, to let the self rest unexamined for a while, to allow the mystery its small, necessary distance. In his notebook he writes, "The soul is a theater where no one watches." This sentence pleases him, not because it is true, but because it sounds true, and sometimes that is enough. He thinks of all the identities he has invented over the years. Alvaro de Campos, the engineer. Ricardo Reyes, the physician. Alberto Caero, the shepherd. Each one a different lens through which to view existence. Which one is him? All of them. None of them.
He is the space between the names, the silence between the words, the blank page before the pen touches down. And in that emptiness, that refusal to be only one thing, he finds a strange kind of freedom. The mirror across the room catches the lamplight. For a moment, he sees his reflection again, small, distant, barely there. He raises a hand. The reflection raises its hand. They acknowledge each other like old acquaintances who have nothing left to say. And that is fine, better even, than speech. Because in solitude, the conversation is never with the reflection anyway. It is with the one doing the looking.
There are nights when the city itself seems solitary, as if the buildings were thinking their own private thoughts. From his window, he watches the wet streets gleam beneath the street lamps, the puddles gathering small galaxies of light. Each passing tram leaves behind a brief shiver of sound that dissolves before it can reach the heart. Lisbon sleeps, but uneasily, like a dreamer who knows he is dreaming. Pessoa writes, "I love the night because it is merciful to everything." Indeed, the darkness hides the unfixable details of life, softens the hard edges of being. The night forgives. It does not ask him to succeed or to be understood. It only asks him to remain awake enough to feel its quiet company. Sometimes he imagines the souls of all the city's insomniacs drifting like smoke above the rooftops, a slow migration of thoughts that never found a listener.
They are his kin, these unseen wanderers, the sleepless, the unfinished,
the ones who live mostly inside their own sentences. He feels their nearness in the tremor of the air, and he understands that solitude is never absolute. Even isolation has its shared frequency. We are alone together, he thinks, each of us glowing faintly in our separate windows, trying not to vanish. He can see into other apartments from here. A woman folding laundry, a man reading by lamplight, a child's shadow moving across a curtain. Each life a small world, complete and unreachable. He wonders what they think about in their quiet moments. Do they feel this same heaviness, this same tender ache of being alive? Probably, almost certainly. We are all variations on the same theme, he thinks. Different instruments, playing the same sad, beautiful song.
The Tagus River moves in the distance, black and patient. It has seen this city through centuries of longing, centuries of solitude. It will outlast all of them, every lonely soul in every quiet room. The thought is not depressing. It is, in its way, comforting. To know that loneliness is older than you are, that it will continue after you're gone, that you are participating in something ancient, something that connects you to every person who has ever stood at a window and felt the weight of being separate. He writes in his notebook, "The rain is telling the truth about everything." He doesn't know what he means exactly, but it feels right. The rain doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than water falling. It doesn't apologize for making things wet, for interrupting plans, for reminding us that we are not in control.
It simply falls. And in that falling, there is honesty. He wishes he could be more like rain, simple, direct, unburdened by thought. But he is human, and humans complicate everything. A church bell tolls in the distance. 1 o'clock. Or is it 2? Time has become elastic again. He closes his notebook. For a moment, he lets his hands rest on the cover, feeling the still warmth of his own pulse through the paper. There is comfort in the small weight of the unwritten, the knowledge that there will always be another page waiting. He looks out at the city once more. The lights are fewer now. One by one, windows are going dark. Sleep is claiming the city. But not him. Not yet. He has learned to be comfortable in this space, this threshold between day and night, between sleep and waking, between the person he is and the person he imagines himself to be. It is a lonely place, yes, but loneliness, he has discovered, is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is simply the price of seeing clearly. The city exhales. He exhales with it. And for a moment, they are one. There are drawers in every life that hold words meant for no one. Pessoa keeps his in a small wooden box. Folded pages, half-written addresses, sentences that began bravely and then lost their way. He once said, "I write because I have nothing to say, and that is what I want to say." To write, then, was to speak into the air and listen for the echo. Tonight he opens the box. The letters smell of old paper and regret. He unfolds one at random.
Dear. That's all it says. The name was never filled in. The rest of the page is blank. He remembers writing it, or rather, he remembers the feeling of wanting to write it, the urgency that filled his chest, the certainty that if he could just find the right words, everything would make sense. But then the certainty faded. The words wouldn't come, or they came and seemed wrong, or they came and seemed too honest, too raw, too likely to wound. So he left it blank. Dear. A letter addressed to no one. A confession without a recipient. He sets it aside and picks up another. This one is longer. 3 full pages of cramped handwriting. He can barely read his own script now. It loops and slants like the handwriting of someone in a hurry, someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. He reads fragments.
And I wonder if you ever think of me, the afternoons we spent by the river. I wanted to tell you that I am not the person you think I am. Who was this letter for? He can't remember. A woman, probably. Or the idea of a woman. He wrote once about the feelings that hurt most, the emotions that sting most, those that are absurd. The longing for impossible things precisely because they are impossible. Nostalgia for what never was. The desire for what could have been. Regret over not being someone else. Dissatisfaction with the world's existence. All these halftones of the soul's consciousness create in us a painful landscape, an eternal sunset of what we are. That is what these letters hold. Not real love, but imagined love. Not real loss, but the loss of what never existed. Pessoa has loved many people in theory, and very few in practice. It's safer that way. Easier.
In his imagination, love is clean. It doesn't require negotiation or compromise. It doesn't demand that you show up day after day, tired and flawed and human. In his imagination, love is a poem. And poems, he knows, are much easier to control than people. He once wrote, "I never paid any attention to people who told me to go out and live. I belonged always to whatever was far from me and to whatever I could never be. Anything that was not mine, however base, always seemed to me to be full of poetry. The only thing I ever loved was pure nothingness." He reads these words now in the lamplight and understands their terrible honesty. He has spent his life loving what cannot be touched, longing for what cannot arrive, building cathedrals in the air, and then mourning their inevitable collapse.
He imagines the letters leaving the room on invisible wings, crossing the night like thoughts in search of a listener. Perhaps some reach the sea. Perhaps they dissolve before they arrive. It does not matter. What matters is the act, the soft rebellion of confession without expectation. He writes so that the silence does not win too easily. He picks up his pen and begins a new letter. Dear stranger, I am writing to you from a room you will never see. It is late and the city is asleep, and I am thinking about all the words I never said, not to you specifically, but to everyone, to the world at large. I am thinking about how we spend our lives trying to be understood, when perhaps what we really want is simply to be witnessed. To have someone say, "Yes, I see you. You were here. You existed."
He pauses. The pen hovers above the paper. Is this true? Is that what he wants? Yes, he decides. Yes. I don't know who you are, but I imagine you were like me, someone who feels too much and says too little, someone who carries a small ache in their chest that never quite goes away, even on the happiest days. If you are reading this, and you probably aren't because this letter will never be sent, I want you to know that you are not alone. We are all walking around with our unsent letters, our unspoken confessions, our hearts full of words that never found their way out. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things are meant to stay inside. Yours in silence, F.P. He sets down the pen. The letter still glows faintly under the lamplight, as if the words retained a little heat from his hand. He thinks of the people he has loved in theory, the ones whose names he repeated to himself until they became metaphors. To love in absence is to build a cathedral of air. It is not unreal, it is simply unfinished.
And in that incompleteness, there is a strange peace. Every letter not sent spares the world another misunderstanding. He folds the new letter carefully, adds it to the box, closes the lid. The box sits on his desk like a small tomb, holding all the things he meant to say and never did. It is both a comfort and a burden. Proof that feeling existed, even if only as a tremor in the mind. He wonders if anyone will ever read these letters. Probably not. They will be burned, most likely, or thrown away after he's gone. And that's fine. They were never really meant for anyone else anyway. They were meant for him, a way of speaking to the parts of himself that couldn't be reached any other way.
Outside, the rain has stopped. The silence that follows is thick and expectant. He listens to it the way you listen to a held breath, waiting for the exhale. Sleep comes reluctantly, like a guest who has forgotten the way. When it finally arrives, it brings not rest,
but mirrors. Streets he has never walked, rooms that repeat themselves endlessly, faces that fade as soon as they turn toward him. He wakes with the taste of thought in his mouth, heavy and metallic. He wrote once, "To dream is to have found what one was seeking, even if one no longer remembers what it was." And perhaps that is the function of solitude, to turn every night into a small rehearsal for eternity, a practice in existing without explanation. He rises, pours water into a chipped cup, and watches it tremble slightly in his hand.
The lamp makes a trembling halo on the wall, like the outline of a soul hesitating before incarnation. In that fragile light, he feels the distance between what is and what is imagined collapse for an instant. Maybe dreaming is the only moment when he is fully alive, because it is the only moment when he is not trying to be. In dreams, there is no performance, no need to justify or explain. You simply are. And the self that exists in dreams, the one that walks through impossible cities, speaks to the dead, flies without question, that self is perhaps more honest than the one he carries through waking life. He remembers a dream from last night, or was it last week? Time collapses in memory. He was walking through Lisbon, but it wasn't Lisbon exactly. The streets were familiar but wrong, as if the city had been rebuilt from memory by someone who had only visited once. He was looking for someone. Who? He couldn't remember.
Every person he passed seemed to know him, but when he tried to speak, they turned away. He walked faster. The streets narrowed, the buildings leaned in, and then he saw it, a door he recognized, his own door, the door to this room. He reached for the handle. It turned easily, but when he stepped inside, the room was empty, not empty of furniture. The desk was there, the lamp, the mirror, empty of him. He stood in the doorway, looking at his own absence, and felt a terror so complete it woke him. He sits now in the real room, the one that is not empty, and wonders what the dream was trying to tell him.
That he is disappearing. That he has already disappeared. Or perhaps the opposite. That he has never really been here at all. That what he thinks of as his life is itself a kind of dream. And somewhere else, in some other room, his real self is waking up. The thought should frighten him, but instead it brings a strange relief. If this is a dream, then nothing he does really matters. Every mistake can be unmade, every regret erased with the opening of eyes. He sits again, opens the window. The city breathes in. Cool air touches his face, almost human in its gentleness. He thinks, solitude is not loneliness. It is the quiet permission to listen to the world without needing to answer it.
The sky is beginning to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but the suggestion of it, that pale blue that comes before the blue. He used to fear this hour, The transition between night and day always felt like a small death, the end of one state and the uncertain beginning of another. But now he finds comfort in it, the in-between, the neither nor. This is where he lives anyway, in the spaces between definitions, between identities, between the person he was and the person he might become. He writes in his notebook, "I am the dream of a dreamer who is also dreaming." The sentence makes him smile. It makes no sense. Perfect sense. Both. He closes the notebook. The light is stronger now. Morning is inevitable. But he has a few more minutes of this suspended state, this beautiful nowhere. He intends to use them well.
The lamp makes a trembling halo on the wall, like the outline of a soul hesitating before incarnation. In that fragile light, he feels the distance between what is and what is imagined collapse for an instant. Maybe dreaming is the only moment when he is fully alive, because it is the only moment when he is not trying to be. In dreams, there is no performance, no need to justify or explain. You simply are. And the self that exists in dreams, the one that walks through impossible cities, speaks to the dead, flies without question, that self is perhaps more honest than the one he carries through waking life. He remembers a dream from last night, or was it last week? Time collapses in memory. He was walking through Lisbon, but it wasn't Lisbon exactly. The streets were familiar but wrong, as if the city had been rebuilt from memory by someone who had only visited once. He was looking for someone. Who? He couldn't remember.
Morning arrives like an apology. The light is thin and indecisive, sliding through the shutters as if uncertain it belongs here. Pessoa dresses slowly, every gesture measured, as though time itself were fragile porcelain. The street below is already awake, vendors setting up their stalls, horses pulling carts, the low hum of human purpose. He watches it from his window, detached, tender, and slightly amused. He admires their certainties, the man sweeping the pavement, the woman counting change, the child running with a loaf of bread. Each performs a ritual that says, "I believe in tomorrow." And perhaps that is the great divide between those who believe in tomorrow and those who are not sure there is one. He writes in his notebook, "To live is to be other. Nothing in us resembles what we once were." The line comforts him. Perhaps that is why the ordinary hurts. It reminds us how easily we disappear into repetition.
How we wake each day and put on the same face, play the same role, pretend we are continuous, when really we are a series of moments, loosely stitched together. He watches a man selling flowers across the street. The same man, in the same spot, every morning. Does he wonder about his life? Does he lie awake at night questioning everything? Or has he found peace in the routine, in the simple transaction of flowers for coins, in the knowledge that he has a place in the world's machinery? Pessoa envies him.
not for the life itself, but for the certainty. He walks out eventually, carrying his solitude like a small folded cloth in his pocket. No one notices. The city is too busy becoming itself. He passes faces that could have been his own in another life. The clerk, the teacher, the sailor, each one a door he didn't walk through.
At a corner cafe, he orders coffee and watches the steam curl upward until it vanishes. Everything vanishes, he thinks, except the act of noticing. And maybe that is all that life asks of us, to keep noticing until we become the noticing itself. The coffee is bitter, too hot. He drinks it anyway, grateful for the small assault on his senses. Pain, discomfort, these things at least prove you're alive. A young woman sits at the next table, writing in a journal. Her hand moves quickly, urgently, as if trying to catch something before it escapes. He recognizes the gesture. He's made it 1,000 times. For a moment, he wants to lean over and tell her, "It's okay. Whatever you're trying to say, it's okay if it doesn't come out right. Words are only approximations anyway. The real thing, the feeling beneath the words, that can never be captured, only circled, only suggested."
But he doesn't say anything. He lets her write. Outside, the city continues its morning rituals. Shutters opening, awnings unfurling, the world putting on its public face. He returns home before noon, lighter somehow, as if observation were a form of release. Solitude does not end when we step outside. It simply changes texture, like light shifting through glass. Back in his room, he sits at the desk. The notebook is still open from this morning. He adds a new line. The ordinary is unbearable until you learn to see it as miraculous. He's not sure he believes this yet, but he wants to. And maybe wanting to believe is the first step toward believing. He looks around the room, the same room he's looked at 1,000 times.
The same lamp, the same mirror, the same shadows. But today, just for a moment, they seem different. Not because they have changed, but because he has decided to see them as holy. The lamp is not just a lamp. It is the thing that holds back the dark. The mirror is not just glass. It is the surface that allows the self to see itself. The shadows are not absence of light. They are proof that light exists. Everything is a small miracle if you look at it the right way. Even this, even him, even now.
As evening folds itself back over the city, Pessoa senses the others, the silent companions of solitude. They are not ghosts, not memories, but possibilities. The selves he might have been if life had tilted differently. They gather in the corners of the room when the lamp is low. He feels them breathing quietly, waiting for him to acknowledge their shared condition. He speaks to them sometimes, not aloud, but in thought. He tells them about the small victories of the day, the sentence that finally resolved itself, the brief moment of contentment between two anxieties. They listen, patient, sympathetic. He senses their approval in the stillness that follows. Perhaps these invisible selves are what keep him company when the hours stretch too long. Each one carries a fragment of the person he once intended to be. The poet who published, the lover who stayed, the friend who spoke first. He does not mourn them anymore. He has learned that to live many potential lives within one's own is a quiet form of grace. Álvaro de Campos sits in the corner, smoking an invisible cigarette. He is the version of Pessoa who said what he meant, who didn't apologize, who lived loudly and without shame. Ricardo Reis stands by the window, calm and classical, watching the street with the detachment of a stoic. He is the version who found peace in accepting that everything passes, that permanence is an illusion, that the only dignity is in facing impermanence with grace. And Alberto Callero sits on the floor, cross-legged like a child. He is the version who stopped thinking altogether, who learned to simply be, who saw the world as it is, without the interference of philosophy or meaning. And then there is Bernardo Soares, sitting at the desk, the one who is most like Pessoa, and yet somehow separate, the one who lives in the Book of Disquiet, recording every tremor of consciousness, every passing shadow.
They are all here. They have always been here. And he understands now that he is not one person, but a chorus, a collection of voices all trying to sing the same song in different keys. He writes, "I am a nomad of my own soul." The phrase pleases him, because that's what he is, a wanderer in the landscape of his own being, never quite settling, never quite arriving, always moving between the different rooms of himself. Some people fear fragmentation. They think identity should be unified, solid, consistent. But Pessoa has learned that multiplicity is not weakness, it is expansiveness. To contain many cells is to contain many worlds. He thinks of all the people who walk through life with only one face, one voice, one way of being. How small that must feel, how confining. To be only yourself, what a terrible limitation.
He closes the notebook and lets the sound of the city recede again, until only the breathing of the unseen remains. The invisible companions settle into their places. They will stay with him through the night, these other selves, these roads not taken, these lives not lived. And he is grateful for them, because in their presence, he is never truly alone. For the first time in days, he feels a calm that resembles understanding, not of the world, but of his place within its silence. There are hours when the mind grows still, not from exhaustion, but from surrender, when the ceaseless tide of thoughts simply withdraws and leaves behind a wide, quiet shore. Pessoa sits in that stillness, the pen motionless in his hand. The city has receded into its own dreaming. The sounds outside are softened by distance.
He can hear his own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, a private metronome keeping time with the invisible. In this rare balance, the world no longer feels opposed to him, but continuous with him. He writes without thinking, and the sentences unfold like smoke. Everything that we see is another thing. The sun is cold, and the shadow is luminous. He does not fully understand what he means, but understanding has stopped mattering. The words are their own truth, the trace of an inner weather that cannot be described by logic. The clarity does not arrive as revelation, but as a soft lessening. The ache remains, but it loses its urgency. It becomes something that can be carried without pain, like a smooth stone in the pocket. He realizes that solitude has not been an exile, but a mirror, not a punishment, but a way of seeing more clearly what has always been here. There is no revelation greater than that. He rises, crosses the small room, and opens the window. The night air touches his face with a gentleness that feels almost human. The rain has stopped. Somewhere below, someone laughs, and the sound travels upward like a small proof that life continues even when one withdraws from it. He feels no envy, no separation, only a faint gratitude that the world still hums, that it needs no witness to keep turning. This is what he has been searching for, perhaps. Not meaning, not answers, just this, the permission to exist without justification.
He thinks of all the years he spent trying to explain himself, trying to fit into categories, trying to be the kind of person others could understand. What a waste of energy. The world doesn't need him to make sense. It needs him to be honest. And honesty, he is discovering, is not about clarity or coherence. It is about allowing yourself to be exactly as confused, as fragmented, as multiple as you actually are. He stands there until the chill becomes a kind of comfort, until his breathing matches the rhythm of the quiet outside. Then he closes the window and returns to his chair, not to write, but simply to be. For a long while he does nothing, and in that doing nothing, he feels more alive than he has in years. The lamp flickers, the shadows shift, and he understands, finally, that this is enough.
This moment, this breath, this small existence in this small room, it doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to lead anywhere. It is complete in itself, the way a note of music is complete, the way a drop of rain is complete. He smiles faintly, not at anything particular, but at the simple fact of being here, present, alive, alone but not lonely. The clarity will fade, he knows. Tomorrow he will wake confused again, restless again, searching again. But tonight, for this one perfect hour, he has found what he was looking for. Not out there in the world, but here, in the quiet center of his own being, and it is enough.
Dawn arrives without ceremony. The light is pale, uncommitted, seeping slowly into the corners of the room. Pessoa watches it find the edges of the desk, the spine of an open book, the glass of water beside his bed. Everything is the same as it was yesterday, and yet everything is changed by the fact that he no longer resists it. He thinks of how often he has sought meaning in the noise of thought, how tirelessly he has turned the machinery of the mind in search of coherence. And now, in this thin light, he understands that meaning was never hidden. It was simply quiet. He has mistaken stillness for absence, but it was presence all along. The city is waking slowly. A cart rattles past. A door opens somewhere, the sound of footsteps on cobblestones. Each sound is ordinary.
Each sound is a small miracle. He has spent so much of his life waiting for the extraordinary, the great love, the profound revelation, the moment that would finally explain everything. But perhaps the extraordinary is just this: the way light moves across a wall, the way water tastes when you're thirsty, the way your own breath sounds in a quiet room. He writes one last line in the notebook before closing it. I am not lonely because I am alone. I am lonely because I am alive. The words do not ask for pity. They state a fact with the calm of a man who has stopped arguing with his own existence. Loneliness is not a condition to be cured. It is part of the texture of being human. We are all separated by the boundaries of our own skin, trapped inside our own perspective, unable to fully know or be known by another.
This is not tragedy. This is simply truth, and there is relief in accepting it. He leaves the notebook open on the desk, the ink still damp. The room holds him like a slow breath. Outside, the first sounds of the city begin again. Footsteps, doors, the creak of carts, the soft rattle of the trams. Each sound is a form of mercy. Each one says, "You are still here." He sits and lets the light settle fully around him. The ache remains, but it is no longer sharp. It has become part of the architecture of being. He understands now that solitude is not a condition to be escaped, but a dimension of consciousness itself, the quiet chamber in which the soul can finally hear its own voice. And that voice is not telling him to change. It is not offering solutions or pointing towards some better version of himself. It is simply saying, this. This is what it is. And for the first time, he finds that enough.
He thinks of all the people who have passed through his life, the friends who drifted away, the loves that never quite formed, the moments of connection that flickered and died. He used to hold these as evidence of his failure,
proof that he was too strange, too interior, too unable to meet the world on its terms. But now he sees them differently, not as failures, but as the natural rhythm of a life lived honestly. Some people are not meant to hold on to things. Some people are meant to let everything pass through them, experiences, people, moments, and simply witness them, honor them, and then release them. He is one of those people, and there is a kind of beauty in that, even if it is a lonely beauty. For the first time, he smiles, faintly, not at anything particular, but at the simple fact of existing. There is no triumph in it, no lesson learned, no transcendence, only a gentle acceptance, soft as dust settling after years of movement. He whispers to no one in particular. To be alone is to belong completely to what cannot be named. The words feel true, truer than anything he has ever written. He thinks of Alvaro, Ricardo, Alberto, Bernardo, all his invented selves, all his attempts to be many things at once. They were not masks, he realizes. They were not lies. They were different ways of being honest about the impossibility of being only one thing. We are all multiple. We all contain contradictions. We all shift and change depending on the light. The only difference is that most people pretend otherwise. He has simply had the courage, or perhaps the inability, to stop pretending. Outside, the sun breaks through the clouds. A shaft of light flows across the floor, illuminating the dust motes that hang in the air. For now, he simply sits, letting the light find him, letting the silence hold him, letting the gentle acceptance settle into his bones. This is what solitude has taught him, that you do not need to be understood to exist, that loneliness is not the opposite of connection, but another form of it, that the self is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, and that living that mystery fully, honestly, without apology, is the only thing any of us can really do. He takes a breath, lets it out slowly. The city hums outside. The clock ticks. The lamp flickers one last time before he turns it off. The morning has arrived, and he is still here, still breathing, still thinking, still alone. And for now, for this one perfect moment, that is exactly where he needs to be. To feel its weight, to remember that he is a person who writes, and that writing is how he makes sense of the senseless, how he turns silence into something bearable, how he proves to himself that he existed. The notebook is full now, nearly every page covered in his cramped handwriting. He will need to start a new one soon. The thought comforts him. There will always be another notebook, another page, another attempt to capture what cannot be captured. And in that endless failing, that endless reaching towards something that will always remain just out of reach, he has found his purpose.
Not to arrive, not to understand, not to solve the mystery of existence, but simply to witness it, to record it, to say in whatever way he can, I was here, I felt this, it mattered, even if only to him. The sun is higher now. The room is bright. He should probably eat something, get dressed properly, go out into the world and perform the rituals of living. But not yet.
For now, he simply sits, letting the light find him, letting the silence hold him, letting the gentle acceptance settle into his bones. This is what solitude has taught him, that you do not need to be understood to exist, that loneliness is not the opposite of connection, but another form of it, that the self is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, and that living that mystery fully, honestly, without apology, is the only thing any of us can really do. He takes a breath, lets it out slowly. The city hums outside. The clock ticks. The lamp flickers one last time before he turns it off. The morning has arrived, and he is still here, still breathing, still thinking, still alone. And for now, for this one perfect moment, that is exactly where he needs to be.
You have been listening to The Quiet Lexicon, Fernando Pessoa, on Solitude, a meditation on the ache of being alive and the small mercies of understanding. May these words stay with you in the quiet hours when the world folds itself into hush and your thoughts grow tender enough to hear themselves think. Solitude is not a wound. It is how the soul gathers itself. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay close to your quiet.